At this point, we will be learning about the relative frequency distribution and the cumulative relative frequency distributions. On the table, you are seeing the values of the simple frequency distribution table. At the same time, you are also seeing some new values, which are the relative frequency values and the cumulative relative frequency values. Previously, we have learned on how to compute for the cumulative frequency values, and this time we will be learning on how to compute for the relative frequency values and the cumulative relative frequency values. So let us remember that the cumulative relative frequency is the kind of table that tells us what fraction of the scores are lower than our scores. So to arrive at the values under the cumulative relative frequency, we need to do two simple steps. Step 1 is to create a relative frequency distribution by dividing each entry in the frequency column of the simple frequency distribution by n. Now to execute this computation, look at the raw score 2. It has this frequency which is equivalent to 1. So to get the relative frequency value, we need to divide 1 with the total number of values or scores, which is equivalent to 25. So 1 divided by 25 is 0.04. Let's go now to the second value. Now, with the 3 raw score, we have the 0 frequency. This is actually the digit or the value that doesn't appear in our dataset or array. So 0 divided by 25 is still 0. And in the third value, which is the raw score of 4, we have the frequency of 4 too. So we divide 4 with 25 and we would also be having the 0.16 value. And you will also do so to the rest of the digits in the array or the dataset. Moving forward with step 2, which is the computation for the cumulative relative frequency, we need to create a cumulative relative frequency distribution by converting the cumulative frequency value into a proportion by dividing it by n, which is the total number of scores, or by adding the relative frequency and the lower cumulative relative frequency value. So as you can see, we have two options in getting the cumulative relative frequency value. So we have the cumulative frequency of the raw score 2, which is 1, and we will divide that with the total number of scores in the dataset, which is 25. So 1 divided by 25 is basically 0.04. So this is actually where we got the 0.04 value. So let's have another example. Look at the raw score 7. So the cumulative frequency for 7 is 16. And again, to compute for the cumulative relative frequency, we just have to divide CF with n or by n, so that we could also have the 0.64 value, which is now our CRF. So again, that is 16 divided by 25, we get 0.64. Now another way to get the CRF value is to also add the relative frequency value plus the lower CRF value. So let's take, for example, raw score 7. We know for a fact that the CF value of 7 is 16 and the RF value is 0.12. So all we have to do is to add 0.12 with the lower CRF value, which is 0.52. And if you will add 0.52 and 12, you will get 0.64, which is the CRF value for the raw score 7. We need to also take note that the CRF for the top score on the table should be 1.0. If it isn't 1.00 or 1.0, then you made some kind of mistake. Perhaps too much rounding off with the lower entries. Again, in this particular example, we have the highest score, which is equivalent to 10. And we need to take note that the top score should get a 1.0 CRF. If not, then your computation might be incorrect.